Hello, we're going to take a look at editing workflow stuff for multi-track recordings. I've got a multi-track drum loop that was recorded at 158 BPM. I have set my project tempo to 160 just to illustrate an example of how we could potentially edit these things. Here are some preferences. So if we go to item fade defaults, you can just take a look at these and pause the video if you want to go through any of these. Let's go through playback, seeking, recording, loop and lane recording, and then just maybe someone's interested in the appearance stuff. I'm going to just briefly go through all of these. Editing behavior. We have these guys. We'll take a closer look at mouse modifiers in a sec. Mouse modifiers. There's a lot of mouse modifiers in Reaper. I'm just going to go over the media item ones. I've got this marquee selection as my left drag. Just going to go through all of the media item stuff. Double click, left click, left drag. I do have this custom Pro Tools Smart Tool Grabber. I'm not sure if I'm using this anymore. You've got to take into account that I've been using Reaper for about 15 years, since about halfway through version 3's development. And so this configuration may not use all of the latest features. I know I definitely do not use Razor edits for anything, and I want to include that in my workflow in the future, but I've become entrenched in my ways, and how I currently works for me. Here's the stretch marker stuff. And that covers preferences. Let's take a look at some relevant actions. I've got the group stuff over here, and I've sorted it by shortcuts. So you can see that I have item grouping on G. So if I select some items, I can press G, and now they're all grouped, and I can make edits, however I like, and that's cool. But let's ungroup these for now to demonstrate the option G or Alt G. Remove items from group. Shift G toggles this boy over here. I've got this toggle track group thing over here just because sometimes I use track groupings, sometimes I don't. You can use track grouping instead of doing this, what I've got bound to G. I've got that bound to Shift Control and G, I believe, and that'll do the same kind of thing, and those settings for which flags you want to have engaged for editing are contained over here. And so you can put things on volume lead and follow, and then you'll see like a lead will be a change, a little, that whatever the group color is will appear on the top left, and if it's on follow, it'll be on the bottom right. And here we can see that we have media item razor edit lead on the top left, and then follow on the bottom right over here of each track. But I don't want to group these tracks, so I'll do Control Alt Shift G, a bit of a claw hand maneuver over there. And then the only other thing that I really have here is, instead of the default S for splits, I've got this split items at time selection razor edits. This is an SWS action, and I've got it bound to Command E and Control E for when I'm on Windows. A lot of my key bindings are inspired by Pro Tools workflow. As much as I rag on Avid and Pro Tools, and they deserve it, they have really nailed the workflow stuff. So, credit where it's due. So the first things first is we have to select the items, press G to group them, whatever you would like to bind it to. Because I do audio post-production and music composition, sometimes I want my grid on beats, sometimes I want it on seconds, sometimes I want it on frames. I've got this bound to 7, 8, and 9 on my numpad. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are subdivisions, and this just makes it easy for me to do stuff. And if I hold in Shift, it'll give me the triplet subdivisions for all of those relevant things. I don't think we go past needing this kind of subdivision for this work. If you're working with drums in particular, it's often a good idea to put them into a group and enable this kind of ghost overlay here, so you can see all of the transients and all of the material. Before we get going, let's take a look at some other actions. We're going to be using Q for add stretch marker, add edit cursor. I also have a bunch of other things bound for Q. Remove all stretch markers in time selection, snap stretch markers in time selection to grid, and this will work on what the grid is currently set to. So if I have it on bars, then it'll snap things to bars. So if I have like a things over here, and then I snap stuff, it'll go to the closest bar, and my edit cursor for some reason. I generally just put my edit cursor where it needs to be, and I press Q. So let's get our grid back, and let's do some little edits, and we'll do it just with the adding stretch markers at the edit cursor. Of course, this is entirely unnecessary and not a good example of what it's like to edit drums that are really out of time and not just set to the wrong tempo, because these will be consistently out of time. Now I can just select all of these things and press that, and these will be to the grid now. And now we'll slowly hear it veer off the grid. That's one way to do things. For this example, I think a better way to do things would be to put our markers at the start of each measure, and then do this kind of thing, and we quantize them to the entire measure. It'll sound the most natural. So those are two things that you can do. Let's take a look at some split behaviors. I have auto crossfade on. So this, okay, let's pretend this is all very out of time, and we're going to make some janky edits just for the sake of example. So we're going to move this over here. We could do this and crossfade it, but there is a bit of this guy in here now because of the way that just the nature of crossfades. Of course, we could move this over here and have another bit of the sample playing that isn't so obviously a transient. We could instead do something like this, where we make our cut and we just grab this bit over here and we stretch the whole thing. And let's do a couple of those kinds of edits. So let's make a cut over here and a cut over here. In this example, this audio just needs to be pulled back. So we'll do that and adjust our fade. And over here, it's the same thing. I have a feeling that a lot of this stuff is just going to be ahead of the grid, but let's see. So now this, let's pretend this is a bit behind. We can now grab this, move it forwards. And then because we have this split over here, we'll only be adjusting the rate of this little set of media items. We can hold in Alt and move this and crossfade into the next media item. Do some slip editing over here by holding in Alt. I've got it set to the top half of the media item, and the bottom half is for copying when I'm holding in the Alt modifier or Option on Mac. This we can just set forward, and this is one thing I really hate about Reaper is you know, when you've got a little section like this and you want to just grab, you know, just the relevant bits. Sometimes it's a little hard when there's not a lot of pixels to go through. I have my gripes with Reaper, such as if I've got a bunch of sends or something that I want to, if I like set up a reverb bus here, I call it like XMX reverb 1, and then I wanted to, you know, take all of this stuff, send it through here, and adjust all of these levels at one go. Like I can't do that. And I can't, you know, select all of these tracks and move them at the same time like you can in other DAWs. That is my biggest gripe with Reaper. How I get about that is I use the routing matrix, and I'll instead do something like this. I'll just send all my stuff this way and then make adjustments, because sometimes it's not as simple as just grabbing this and then sending it through there. You can also adjust the default send level. So I've got mine at -infinity because generally I use it for effect sends. It's good to get familiar with the routing metrics if you're going to be doing much of anything in Reaper. So we can move this over here. We see we cut off a little bit of the sample back here. Bring that back. Let's pretend this is very early, so we can move that. And then do something like that. And yeah, this is kind of how I edit multi-track stuff in Reaper. This is not the perfect demonstration for something which has maybe fluctuating time, like the drum isn't tight. But these are the techniques that you would use in that instance in any case. This is a particularly good example of when you need to stretch an item out here, because, if this is going to have too much of the material from this file, and it's not a big deal, but you want to optimize for fidelity in all of these instances. And in some cases, that means dealing with the compromise of time stretching things. Even though I don't like to do much time stretching and adjusting rates, but this is quite a significant adjustment in rate of like 20%, but it's over such a small time domain. I don't think it's a big deal, and then we don't hear any duplicate audio in a short time span, which would be annoying. Yeah, and obviously when we stretch things like this, it's going to move this guy out of time. So then, you just make a cut over there, do that kind of thing. And we're flying through this edit, and it becomes very quick. I'm not going to demonstrate dynamic split because I don't feel like it works super well for this kind of editing workflow. I find that most of the time when I'm using dynamic splits, I'm going in and adjusting where the stretch markers are, so I do prefer to just do it by hand. I find that it yields more accurate results and overall improves the quality of the sound. Let's do a couple more of these guys. They essentially amount to the same end result as stretching and fading. Not exactly the same, but comparable. Some button presses there, skill issues. Yeah. Anyway, that's about all I wanted to demonstrate.